Hello, and welcome to School Health Presents, working with our exceptional individuals during the COVID-19 pandemic. This particular video is going to focus on realistically using things we've got around any house, teaching daily life skills, working in a fine motor-like fashion, and talking nutrition and hygiene along the way. Now, I'll be using tools from the Adaptive Table Service Kit from our good friends at Education Associates, but I'm going to share with you, you can use any tools that you've got lying around the house. What do I mean by that? Well, within the kit, we see things like plates and saucers, forks and cups. And so yes, what I'm getting at right now is putting together ideas as to how to sit down for a meal, how to set a table, how to then clean up after oneself. Why? Because those are life skills that every individual needs to have. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, I can recognize the difference between a salad fork and a regular fork for the meals. I also know that a spoon is going to be a different size than a soup spoon. But those were things I learned later on in life. There are so many different ways that you can set a table, but there are some basic things we need to understand. What is a fork used for? What is a spoon used for? What is a knife used for? How do we have things on a plate? How are we moving and eating? And even if we've got individuals who struggle in a fine motor way to get food up to their mouth, we can make adjustments in what we're doing along the way. The critical piece is this: as we sit down to meals, to begin to create a routine that can be carried on well beyond what's going on in the next few months. Why do I say that? We've lost over the last few generations the ways that we used to actually look at meals. So for example, some of us remember the days when you'd have breakfast in the morning, and it could be any number of different breakfast cereals. Those stay the same. But many of us, especially during the 60s, came home for lunch. We didn't necessarily stay at school. A little bit different. When we'd come home for lunch, things would be prepared for us. And then we'd have a larger family style dinner. Our work doesn't necessarily allow for that these days. And to those of you families that are still able to have things like that, that's awesome. Thank you. We're going to talk about what to speak about too in the context of this. But many times that's not possible. And for some of our individuals with differing abilities, what we tend to find is that they end up being alone many different points in time. So teaching them skills like this actually will help them throughout the course of their whole lives. So as we look at different things, you don't want to take anything for granted. A cup. What do we put in a cup? How much should we put in a cup? Here's why I want to bring this particular point up when it comes to something as simple as a cup. We have good spatial recognition, at least to a certain degree. Not all of our students do have that. And so what you can start by doing is saying, okay, we're going to fill this with water, with milk, with juice, whatever it is we're going to fill it with, but we're going to fill it halfway. Why? So that when we bring it up, it doesn't spill. That when we're setting it down, we're pouring things, and we're pouring it in such a way that we know when to pull back. Oh, and by the way, if we say half full, guess what we're working on? Yeah, we're working on measurement too. And so we're not saying a half cup versus a teaspoon versus a tablespoon. No, half full. And this is, please, for those of you sitting there going, was the glass half full or half empty? No, the focus is let's get a mindset going. And so we've got that glass that's half full. Great. How do you grab it? How do you bring it up to your mouth? These are things that oftentimes we take for granted, yet some of our individuals with different abilities may not have that full understanding. Why? They may have worked with a sippy cup for a long point in their lives. They may have worked simply from a straw. What happens when you've got that individual that doesn't need to use a water bottle with the straw coming in? Well, how do you work with them on that? So these are some simple things that we want to work on because they're not always simple to everyone. So something like taking a drink from a cup. Coffee mugs. How do we hold a coffee mug as it comes up? Why is that handle there? A lot of people don't know that. It's so that we protect ourselves in case the cup itself is hot. We want, again, our individuals to be aware of that, even if we're not dealing with hot liquids at that point in time. We want to, again, teach them about how to fill things, how to go into things, so that when they move into the future, if they are drinking things like tea or coffee, that they understand how to grab a mug or a glass, even hot chocolate, so that they don't burn their hands if it gets too hot. So those are pragmatic skills that will, again, work on the rest of their lives. And guess what they're also doing? They're working fine motor. They're working pouring. They're working that idea of what's half full. When should I stop? When should I move things back? These are actually complicated activities when you stop to think about it. What about plates? Well, what do you put in a plate, and how do you eat off a plate versus how do you eat out of a bowl? You know, the ironic thing is when we take a look at things like any type of silverware, a spoon, a fork, we can tend to use various tools for different things. Now, it's hard to eat soup sometimes with a fork. However, it's not hard to put vegetables in a bowl like this and eat those vegetables with a fork as opposed to a spoon. So what are the different uses? How do they work? Another important thing, and I've got the spoons out here because I'm always afraid of being around forks myself, what is the best way to put food in your mouth when you are using a fork? These are things we need to be aware of too. How do you hold a spoon? How do you hold a fork? Because we don't always want to grab like that. So what are some of the techniques? And guess what we're doing? We can also be working on our three-point grasp as we come through. We can be working on a different variety of skills along the way. How about afterwards? How do we clean up? You know, this is simply a rag used for cleaning up. What do we need to be doing while we're cleaning up? Here's another crazy skill that we've lost over the course of time. Doing dishes. Because what we want to keep in mind too on the whole idea of hygiene is the fact that we want to wash the dishes. We assume so many people have dishwashers in this day and age. We can't. We want to understand that teaching a skill like dishwashing is important for several different things. First and foremost, it's important because of hygiene. The second thing that we want to be aware of when we're teaching how to wash and maybe even dry dishes is the fact that we are teaching a skill that, again, can be transferred on. If that individual is able to live independently, they may not understand how to use a dishwasher or may not be in a place that has a dishwasher. So let's ingrain them with those skills of how to clean things. The other thing we're doing is giving them a pragmatic skill. What happens if at some point in their lives that individual has an opportunity to work in the food service arena? You know, there are some phenomenal restaurants that are out there. Please support your local restaurants during this point in time. Call in the orders and then either have them delivered or pick them up curbside. But there are some phenomenal restaurants that hire individuals with exceptionalities. Why? Because they work hard and they do a great job. So we're teaching them also how to wash dishes. Maybe we're teaching them, you know, how to bus a table. Maybe we're teaching them how to set a table for someone as they're coming out. So we're teaching different skills along the way. They can also be turned into vocational skills down the road. So again, something as simple as using dishes, using silverware, using cups, and encouraging an individual to feed themselves is a great skill that we can be using. And we can start talking about sharing food. Please, thank you, things like that, that we, simply because of time, have lost track of. What about those individuals that can't use those types of devices, that need a specialized spoon or need some assistance? We can still work with them to engage with them as to how to speak during the meal. What are proper things to bring up table-wise? You don't want to talk about certain topics. You know, you're not going to talk about how in the backyard, it's so muddy and yucky and all that as you're eating food. Maybe what you want to talk about is how was your day, things of that nature. So let's get conversations going over this. But you're teaching solid skills when it comes to eating, but it's also hygiene. It's also tying into so many things that we can be doing throughout the course of our lives.